been on this awesome series called Flourish, and we've talked about so many great things. Today we're going to talk about flourishing recreationally. Recreationally, what does that mean? You might be asking. Well, it doesn't mean that I want you to be really good at your soccer team. I'm not saying that you need to, God wants you to really flourish in your fantasy football league. Right? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying God wants you to really flourish at stuff you like to do, cycling or, getting out there and being part of, that all is good. It's good. Recreation is good. In fact, there's a little word inside of recreation that I think is meaningful, and it's recreate. God intends for us to recreate his life in us, I think in a routine way. And today I want to talk about how that happens best. And there's a thing a secret, let's put it that way, a secret that I'm going to share with you today that will ensure that the presence of God lives in your life in a routine way, not just when you come to church. And it's a way that you will be able to express and articulate and walk in faith that God is who he says he is. That's the secret I'm going to share with you today. Turn to your neighbor and say, ooh, okay. Here we go. If you ask anybody on the street, how you doing today? What do you think they're going to say? How you doing? How you doing today? Fine. And then there's one other word. No. Busy. Yeah. Good. Good is just like fine. I don't know what it is with my teenage kids. All through their lives is like, hey, how's it going today? Fine. How's it going today? Good. No, there's some other word that most people, once you get to the next sentence, they're going to say, yeah, man, just been really busy. And it is a cultural phenomenon. It is a cultural problem. And it can mean, they might be saying it because they're overwhelmed, or they might be saying it because they think they want to make sure you know that they're important, or that they're needed. All those things can go into it. But no, here's what nobody says when you say, "Hey, how are you doing today?" They never say, "Well, I'm kind of bored. I watched Netflix for a long time yesterday. Wasted about 4 hours on TikTok. It's pretty, I just did that." We're busy working. So many Americans are working all the time. They sleep some. They work a lot. And there's something about this that takes over. It's different than a lot of other countries around the world. 37% of Americans take less than 7 vacation days a year. They are just working. Only 14% of Americans take 2 weeks of vacation a year. Think about that. 14% only, that's how many people take a 2-week vacation. 20% of us stay in touch while we're away on vacation. It is crazy. But here's the thing. It's not just work that's the problem. We're also really busy with leisure and entertainment and recreation. We're so starved for rest and recreation that we overfill our lives with it. We overdose on good things that are actually fun, or hobbies, or friends, or work, or movies, or even church can end up being this thing that you sort of treat like it's my recreation or it's my renewal thing. I tell you what's really getting in the way of a lot of stuff, and it has to do with recreation. It's kids' sports. Kids' sports, it's taking over everything. It's taking over every weekend. It's taking over weeknights. It's taking over any kind of other volunteerism. It is a deal, and it's hard to manage. How do we figure out how to deal with all of these things? Often we're trying to do these things to create a life that is flourishing, right? That's why we do it. That's why we do these things. We want to flourish. We want to recreate. We want to recreate. We want just to live our fullest life. But what I find is that we end up being spiritually dead because we feed all these other parts of our life instead of feeding the spiritual part. The great author and theologian Dallas Willard has said, hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our day. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. And it's one of the most profound problems we have in our culture, because we have so many things, we're trying to do so many things, and there's challenges to this. There's 3 challenges I want to highlight for you before we get to some solutions. Number 1, there is competition for our time and our attention. Since the majority of our time is spent working, we do a little bit of time sleeping, although I've found that, man, my teenagers sleep a lot. I mean, it's amazing how much they can sleep. They need it, as I understand it. And then there's a time when you kind of grow up into middle, you're starting to be an adult, and then you have kids, and then you don't sleep anymore for a while. And then you get an older, midlife and beyond, and then you can't sleep again. I don't know what all that's about, but we try to figure out our sleep, but we work a lot. And why do we work a lot? Because of the saying. Have you ever heard the saying, time is money? Do you know that saying? Yes, time is money. Depending on what kind of job you have, your time is worth a lot of money or a little bit of money. And our obsession with time and money is really the battle for our attention. What are we going to focus on? What are we going to think about most? What are we going to put our attention on? Which is why Jesus himself in Matthew 6:24 says, no one can serve 2 masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Jesus is talking about something internal, something that's different. God knows we need money to live. That's true. But he doesn't want all our allegiance given to making money. Does that make sense? We all have to have a job, but where does your allegiance lie is the real question. For the Christian, Jesus makes it clear you can't serve God and money, so you must choose who you're going to serve. And that means God has a real strong opinion about how you spend your time. Are you following me? Okay. The second challenge is we believe the lie that more is better. Some of you are like, well, that's not a lie. That's actually true. More is better, whether it's greed or achievement or recreation or all these things. We wrestle with the belief that more is always better. And part of learning how to rest, part of learning how to have recreation in your life that's healthy is you have to answer this one profound and meaningful question. And the question is, how much is enough? How much is enough for you? Ecclesiastes 4:6 says, better 1 handful with tranquility than 2 handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. Now you understand, tranquility and toil are 2 descriptions of how our time is managed. King Solomon wrote this. He was the most wise man who ever lived, and he seems to say more is not always better. He seems to say that, in fact, this verse indicates there is tranquility and peace in having less. Number 3, our time is limited. Our time, the challenge for all of us is our time is limited. I don't know about you, but as I get older, it seems like everything in time is moving faster. You guys get this? It's like speeding to a cataclysmic end. I just don't know what's coming, but since time is a limited resource, we're forced. Everybody say forced. You are forced to prioritize. You have to prioritize. We all do. We are challenged to choose. In order to be healthy, we must accept limitations. Limitations. Think about it. Think about budgets. Think about the speed limit. Some of you need to think about the speed limit a little more. I was on my way to church this morning, and I was speeding, and one of you caught me. I came in, I parked my car, and as I was walking out of my car, Ed came up to me and said, "Hey, you're on fire this morning, huh?" It's like, I'm excited to hear what the message is. You were going fast. So I repented, and then it was okay. But here's the thing. You got to understand that the limitation is real. There's more freedom in a budget than a mountain of debt. Are you with me? There is more safety in slowing down than in speeding up. It's safety. You won't always make it on time, but at least you'll get there. There's more physical, emotional, and mental health in a Sabbath day than becoming a workaholic. The psalmist reminds us of how short life really is. Psalm 39 verse 4 says, "Lord, remind me how brief my time on earth will be. Remind me that my days are numbered, how fleeting my life is. You have made my life no longer than the width of my hand. My entire lifetime is just a moment to you. At best, each of us is but a breath." If this is true, then we have to really take a serious look at how God created us and what He has given us in order to flourish. What He's given us in order for us to be filled with joy and life and peace and strength. And I submit to you this morning, it's called the gift of the Sabbath. The gift of the Sabbath. Some of you are disappointed now. Listen, we talk about this a couple times a year because it's such a problem in our culture. What it looks like to make time for God. Let's start in Genesis 1:31, and Genesis 2:3. It says, "Then God looked over all He had made, and He saw that it was very good. And evening passed and morning came, making the sixth day. So the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was completed. On the seventh day, God had finished His work of creation, so He rested from all His work. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because it was the day when He rested from all His work of creation." Now, we already know that God is a worker, right? He goes to work creating all this incredible world and cosmos around us, the universe, and He makes animals, and He makes man, and He makes woman, and it's all good. It's all good, and that's the problem for some of us. Like, there's so many good things, now we overdose on the good things. But God does something unique here that is important to identify. After 6 days of work, He's finished with creation. You thought your week was productive. But then after the work, God rested. Just let that sink in for a second. God rested. Yeah, but Pastor, I'm an entrepreneur, and I don't know, I can't get my schedule down. Yeah, but Pastor, I'm getting my master's degree, and I really need. Yeah, but I'm a type A personality, and so I don't do the rest thing. The word rested in Hebrew is Shabbat. Everybody say it with me? Shabbat. It means stop, cease, be done. It's where we get the word Sabbath. It also means to be complete. Also translated as to celebrate. So God, who doesn't need a nap, who doesn't sleep, who doesn't need a vacation, is not worn out, not tired, not dragging His feet. He wasn't just being grumpy saying, I got to take a break. God, unlike anyone else in all creation, He rested. Now, we are made in the image of God. Okay? We are His image bearers, and that means we are made to reflect Him, to mirror what God is like in this world that we live in. And when God rested, He hardwired a rhythm into creation. It's a rhythm of 6 and 1. 6 and 1, 6 and 1, 6 and 1. It's a cadence that can help keep you healthy and cause you and your life to flourish. Consider the fact, I read this week. If God created humans on the 6th day, now check this out. Their first orientation to God, their first impression of God was the Sabbath. They hadn't lived 24 hours, and their first impression, their first orientation to God in their existence was Sabbath. Rest, delight in the world, relationship, and worship. It's hardwired into our creation, and it doesn't work when you push against it. Here's how God set it up in the original rule, the rules of the 10 Commandments, all right? Exodus 20 verse 8 says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Think about those two words, blessing and holy. Are there two more difficult and elusive words to get into your life than blessing and holy? Without Jesus, they are. Without God, it's the thing we chase after. I want to be blessed, and I want to be holy and set apart to God. It's two of the most difficult things we wrestle with in our humanity. So in Exodus, in the 10th commandment, 10 commandments, Sabbath was rooted in the idea of creation, all right? God rested, so you rest. Now 40 years later, all you SpongeBob fans, 40 years later, a new generation is getting ready to possess the promised land. So they've been in the wilderness. If you don't know the story, God delivers his people from Egypt, and they go into this wilderness, and they run around for 40 years, and God's trying to teach them stuff, and they're supposed to go in and possess the land, but a whole generation goes by, and a new generation comes up after 40 years, and they go in and possess the land. And he reminds the next generation of what it means to flourish. That's in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 12. It says, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord our God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or your daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, or any of your animals. This sounds very familiar. We just read it. Nor any foreigner residing in your town, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Wow. He said everybody rests. One of the American innovations, and maybe it's just we do it better than most people around the world, is to try to do a job, have work that actually keeps producing when you're not working. Passive income, residual income, all that stuff. But another way to say that, another way to do it is, I have a lot of people working for me, and they work so I can rest. And that means you've really made it. That's an American concept. The Sabbath is wholly and completely different. He says everybody rests. Everybody rests in your household. Everything that you have something to do with, you rest. And there's something powerful that happens when you see it here. He says, remember that you were, so here it is. He says, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. And remember that you were slaves. Everybody say slaves. You were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. See, here, Sabbath is not rooted in creation. It's rooted in the Exodus story. So Sabbath is not just how we come like God and reveal God to the world. It is an act of defiance against Egypt, against Pharaoh, and against slavery. Do you see that? It's an act of defiance because the Sabbath is not just about rest. It is about resistance. You have to resist what is going on around you. You and I have to resist the urge to keep going and make it happen. You and I have to resist the urge to be on all the time, 24/7. You and I must resist the ways of our culture, of our Egypt, of Pharaoh, and of slavery. We get enslaved to these things. Here's how John Mark Comer, he describes in his beautifully written book called The Garden City. He says it like this. He says, at Sinai, which was the mountain where God first met his people, at Sinai, it's a way of saying yes to God and his world. That's where the 10 Commandments were given. In Deuteronomy, it's a way of saying no to Egypt and its system. At Sinai, it's an invitation to join God in his delight. In Deuteronomy, it's a warning to stay away from Egypt's way of life. Now, there's all sorts of discussion about whether or not we as modern Christians, or another way to say it would be New Testament Christians, have to obey or practice the Sabbath. We're New Testament believers, and so that, people would say, well, that's Old Testament law. And hey, what about Jesus, who seemed to always be breaking the Sabbath? Jesus, he's like, Pastor Ross, if Jesus broke the Sabbath, I'm sure I'll be fine. I think if you don't understand what Jesus was doing there, then you're going to miss the point. Jesus was pushing back on religious legalism, traditions that became the way of getting to God. And he was offering advice on it. This week in your small groups, I'm going to have you read the whole passage where Jesus has this interaction with the Pharisees, with the religious leaders, and with a guy who needed to be healed. And you're going to read that and talk about it. But here's how Jesus ends this little passage. In Mark 2:27, Jesus says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. See, for the New Testament Christian, every day is set apart as holy. Okay, so you got to remember that. Every day is set apart as holy. And every day has the lordship of Jesus invited into your life. No matter what you do, no matter if you're working or you're not working. And the problem is we don't understand the dynamic of the gift of Sabbath. And what a beautiful thing it is. You and I have to understand that when we see that God, what Jesus says, look, man wasn't made for the Sabbath. So Sabbath was made to be a blessing to man. Hallelujah. It's a blessing to you. Yes. It's a thing that makes you have the opportunity for holiness to come into your soul because you've spent the day being able to not be worried, anxious, forced into all kinds of other distractions, and you're allowed to invite God into being with you in a way that is different than when you get up during the day, every other day that you work, and you pray a little prayer and say, God be with you. That's a good prayer. That's a good habit. And I pray that God is with you all day long, every day, because that's how he made you. But if we don't stop, if we don't find a way to recreate our souls the way we're made, we will run out of gas. We will get in trouble. Jesus says it's a commandment in the Old Testament, right? He says, yeah, it's a commandment, but it's a gift from God. I get to rest, to be refreshed and refuel my life. I get to pause once a week and say, I have enough. I don't need more. I get to say, I am enough. God takes pleasure in me just as I am. I don't have to produce something. I don't have to earn God's love and favor. I can't really do that at all, really. I get to do this. I get to have this Sabbath. It's a gift and it's wisdom. Everybody say wisdom. The Sabbath is not an imposition. It is an essential delivery mechanism for God's love and for his presence and for his joy. Sabbath keeping is a way of life. There's not a real right way to do this, right? Listen, Amy and I, we have tried really hard over the last several years to do the Sabbath on Friday night at 6 to Saturday night at 6. And I try not to do any work, church-related work during that 24 hours. And I just, if I don't have the message done, I just wait till Saturday night. And then I stress out. Just kidding. Just kidding. What I've learned is if I'll take the Sabbath, the message comes easier on Saturday night if I don't have it done. You got to realize there's something that happens here. You can pick any day you want to. You want to pick Saturday night 6 to Sunday night at 6. Fine, pick that. Pick another day that works with your schedule. But here's the problem. You can't have no days that are not set apart for God. Because it's a wiring within creation. It's not a legalistic rule. It's a way to live and understand life. Here's what it is. This is a good way to say it. You don't have to keep the Sabbath. You don't have to. You get to keep the Sabbath. It's not a have to. It's a get to. But the problem is, it's really hard to do it. Remember, God, what Sabbath is, it predates Old Testament, right? It predates any of the Old Testament. I don't know that anybody really cares about that. Thank you, John. Thank you, John. It predates the Old Testament. Listen to this. It predates sin. Sin wasn't around when God established the Sabbath. There's something really powerful about the rhythm of creation rather than a rule in a book. Walter Brueggemann said, brilliant author, has written about Sabbath a lot. People who keep Sabbath live all 7 days differently. So how do we resist then? Here we go. How do we resist? Because you're going to have to resist in order to rest. In order to flourish recreationally, you're going to have to settle a few issues. Here they are. Ready? Do you want them? All right, I'm almost done. Band, why don't you come back up? Number one, identity instead of utility. You got to settle that God knows you and loves you, and your identity is found in him, and you're not having to prove anything to him or to the world. If your identity is in him, he's going to direct you and lead you. He's going to help you. He's going to train you. But he is not just using you like a tool. I know the analogy of instrument and tool, but nobody likes to be called a tool. You know what I'm saying? So it's not a great definition. You are a son or a daughter, and you got to settle that you're not just something to wield, an inanimate object to wield in God's hand. He doesn't see you that way at all. See, if your self-worth is based on your production and accomplishments, you won't be satisfied. You'll never be done. You'll never be able to practice Sabbath. You'll just need to be producing more and working harder and accomplishing more to fill the void. I love how Eugene Peterson says it. He says, God is not interested in you simply as an inanimate object to wield in his world, but as a partner in wonder. Oh, he wants you to enjoy what he's doing. Sabbath is not a utilitarian tool that God gave us to be more productive. That's a 7 Habits of Highly Effective People book, which I love. I love that book. Have you ever read that book? I highly recommend it. What he says is the 7th habit is sharpening the saw. And what his argument is you got to stop to sharpen the saw. You just can't keep working or your saw is really dull. And then you won't be able to get stuff done faster. Good principle. Awesome principle. Not the Sabbath. The Sabbath isn't just about you get more stuff done. But I do believe that it happens. Something happens because what the Sabbath does is you settle on, okay, God, I'm going to give this time to you. And you do it in faith. You don't do it out of religion or tradition or any of that. You do it out of faith. And sometimes that means you don't feel it, but you do it anyway. You develop a habit. And then what happens is God gets involved in your life in a way that he wasn't allowed if you didn't provide that day. He's trying. He's ready. He's willing. But when you make space, something else happens. And God gets behind stuff that you're doing, and sometimes he redirects what you're doing so that you're not so stressed out and pressured. That's what it is. It's your identity. The Sabbath slows us down enough to remember who we are. The Sabbath helps us be defined and valued and loved, not because of what we do, but because of who we are. The second resistance mindset you have to develop is consistency instead of intensity. What's the secular rhythm of this idea, right? Here it is. In our American Western world, work, vacation. That's how we do it, isn't it? Work really hard, vacation. It doesn't work. The vacation never gets you back to reset. It's a sacred Sabbath rhythm, 6 and 1, 6 and 1, 6 and 1, rhythm instead of random. It's not random. This is how God did it. And it's sometimes we think that we can just use our intensity to spiritually move and grow. Oh, I'm really going to do this now. Pastor Ross's message was really awesome. I'm just going to totally give into it, and I'm just going to really make it happen. Oh, my intensity. No, it's not the intensity that we need. It's the consistency. Simon Sinek said it. He's the great quote. He said, intensity can never replace consistency. And you can see it. We try to do it in lifting weights. What do? I'm going to lift weights for 3 days, and then we can't do anything with our arms for like 3 more days. And then you can't, it's like the intensity is not the important thing. The consistency is what's important. Are you with me? God can do more with you with the 6 days you give him than you can do by yourself in 7. And then the third resistance mindset is preparation instead of inspiration. Preparation instead of inspiration. We all kind of want a perfect day, like we do Sabbath and we're like, we see it. It's beautiful. The skies are blue and the birds are singing and I've already finished all my work and I'm just sitting around with a beverage of my choice, enjoying God's creation. Those goosebumps might not come for you on the Sabbath. And part of the reason they don't come is because you haven't prepared for the Sabbath. There's work involved in the Sabbath. Like all spiritual disciplines, developing the habit is the process that unleashes the life. So you have to get used to getting ready not to do anything. Are you with me? It's like Thanksgiving dinner, right? We're about to experience Thanksgiving, right? What happens Thanksgiving Day, like the 2 days before it? Baking and stuff, and people are, it's crazy how much food. And then you get to the table and the food finally gets there and you set it down and it's gone in 10 minutes. It's like, what did we just do this for? But then there's like leftovers. It's the best. Because all you're doing is you're sitting around watching the game and you got all these cool leftovers that you never have because you did all this preparation to lay around. You understand, Sabbath is a 24-hour weekly habit of rest with no have-tos. You stop with the have-tos. And I'll say this just about Jesus. Jesus is okay if you have to go to work on a Saturday. He's not stressed out because it happens. In the story you're going to read this week in your small groups, Jesus actually says, hey, don't you go get your donkey when they get in a ditch? If it's a Sabbath, you go. It was a very religious society. No, they still got the donkey. Sometimes you have to go to work. It's not about ritual. It's not about religion. It's not about tradition. It's not a legalistic thing, but it is something that if you will take part in it, it will create, it's a sacrifice that creates life and flourishing for us. Sabbath is a 24-hour block of time in which we stop work, we enjoy rest, we practice delight in Him, delight in what is happening in our life, and contemplate God. It's not a day off, not a day when a day off is when you stop working for your employer or for yourself. It's not just a day to clean house, but if you feel like cleaning the house will heal your soul, by all means, clean it a little bit on the Sabbath. I end up doing that. I'm like, what are we doing around here? Clean it all up, and then I feel better. But the filter for a Sabbath is rest and worship and delight. Come on, stand up with me. Maybe we'll just open up our hands again. I know this is a hard message. And it's something that maybe we don't feel compelled to do, but I believe most of us are starving for it. How can we get a hold of our life in a way? How can we let God get a hold of our life in a way that we practice this rhythm so we can flourish? So just open up your hands like this to the Lord. And let's consider how you can make room for him. Consider how you might make room for him.